You know, when you see those huge choreographed parades in North Korea, with all the soldiers and slogans, there's one figure you might notice, often with a quiet smile. That's Kim Yo Jong, the Supreme Leader's younger sister. But you really shouldn't let that subtle presence fool you. She is, by many accounts, one of the most powerful and most dangerous women on the planet right now.
So let's get right into it. The big question we're tackling here is pretty straightforward. How did this person, who was basically a ghost for years, turn into a global power player whose words can actually shake up international security? It's a fascinating and pretty chilling story of a calculated rise to power.
To really get a handle on her influence, you have to go back to the beginning. Her journey wasn't some accident. It was a carefully, meticulously planned path that took her from a hidden, sheltered childhood right into the absolute core of North Korean power.
Now, what's really striking when you look at this timeline is just the sheer speed of her ascent. We're talking about just a few years to go from a total unknown to a public figure, then a key government official, and finally a sanctioned individual on the world stage. Every single one of these was a deliberate step out of the shadows.
Think about this. During some of her most important formative years in Switzerland, she was living under a fake name. She and her brother, Kim Jong Un, were supposed to look like ordinary Korean kids. But their reality? It was anything but. They were watched 24/7 by North Korean officials and undercover bodyguards, their entire lives managed by the state, even thousands of miles from home.
Well, that carefully built anonymity is long, long gone. Today, she's got a new, much more formidable title, the Iron Lady of the regime. And this isn't just some casual nickname. It really reflects her total consolidation of power and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless.
So where does all this power actually come from? Well, her first, and maybe her most critical role, was as the master architect of the state's entire story. And in a country like North Korea, if you control the narrative, you control literally everything.
By basically becoming the head of the propaganda and agitation department, she grabbed the controls to the nation's brain. This department decides what 26 million people see, what they hear, and what they're taught to believe about their leader and the rest of the world. It is, without a doubt, the foundation of the regime's power.
Her mission was crystal clear: to sculpt her brother's public image into a perfect copy of their revered grandfather, the founder of the nation. Every single photo, every news report, every public appearance, it was all curated by her to project strength and completely erase any hint of weakness. This makes her just as responsible for the regime's ideology as her brother is. But she wasn't content to just stay behind the scenes. Her power evolved, and pretty soon she began to weaponize her own voice on the global stage, using her words as a direct tool of statecraft. At first, her whole approach was surprisingly disarming. I mean, at the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea, she launched what everyone started calling a charm offensive. Her smiles and her soft diplomacy, it presented this friendly, modern face for the regime, and it actually eased tensions for a little while.
But yeah, that carefully crafted image, it got shattered pretty quickly. She started issuing her own official statements, and the tone changed dramatically. This quote where she compares South Korea to a scared, barking dog, that was really the beginning of her new role as the regime's #1 attack dog.
And these insults, they're not just random outbursts. They are very calculated attacks. By personally going after world leaders like the US president, she sends a message of complete dominance and contempt. It's all about positioning North Korea as defiant and totally unafraid of any superpower. And she saves her absolute most venomous language for the people who manage to escape North Korea. Calling them scum and filthy insects isn't just talk, it's a direct threat. It's a promise of horrible consequences for what the regime sees as the ultimate act of betrayal. And just to prove that her threats were not empty, she turned her words into action. In 2020, after some activists sent leaflets over the border, she personally ordered the demolition of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, a building that was a huge symbol of peace and dialogue. Her point was made with explosives. So, this act of blowing up a building, it really gets us to the heart of her power. It doesn't come from some formal title like president or general. It operates completely outside of traditional structures. And that is precisely what makes her so incredibly influential and so unpredictable.
Just take a look at this chart. For decades, issuing official statements from the state was a job reserved for one person and one person only, the supreme leader.
But since 2020, Kim Yo Jong has issued over 40 of them. She has become the de facto mouthpiece and the second voice of the entire nation.
Miss Table really breaks it down perfectly. Her brother's power is formal, right? It's based on his official titles. Hers is completely informal. It comes from two things you just can't touch: her royal bloodline and her absolute control over the state's message. She has zero official accountability, which makes her actions dangerously unpredictable.
And this informal power, it is used with a chilling ruthlessness. I mean, intelligence sources and high-level defectors believe she was a key player behind the regime's most infamous and brutal acts, including the execution of her own uncle and the assassination of her half-brother. So you put it all together: the propaganda machine, the diplomatic attacks, this unique informal power, and it all leads to the single most important question being asked in intelligence agencies all over the world. What happens if her brother is suddenly out of the picture? The stability of the entire region could literally depend on the answer.
And according to people who have actually been on the inside, there's a pretty clear scenario. If Kim Jong Un were to die suddenly and there's no mature male heir ready to go, then party precedent and, most importantly, the Pek-2 bloodline, that's the sacred, mythical lineage of the Kim family, it all makes her the one and only logical successor.
Now look, history has seen plenty of ruthless female rulers, of course, but what makes Kim Yo Jong's potential succession so completely unprecedented is the context. No empress or queen in history has ever had a nuclear arsenal, a ballistic missile program, and total information control over a modern state. It's a combination that is totally unique to our time.
And that leaves us with the final, really unsettling question. She's already shown us she's capable of brutal language and decisive, destructive action. If she were to take full control, what would that even mean for a world that's already on edge? Her brand of diplomacy by intimidation would suddenly become the official policy of a nuclear power.
Ultimately, the story of Kim Yo Jong is a really powerful reminder that the most formidable kind of power often grows not in the open, not in government halls, but deep in the shadows. It's unaccountable, it's unpredictable, and in this case, it could one day hold the fate of millions of people in its hands.